We're coming together to connect and network and have fun and hear stories, but to also learn together. So I'm excited about all the workshop presenters today. This is Sarah's second year with us. I'm excited at her workshop. She killed it last year. And so Sarah is phenomenal. I'll let her do her own intro, but you guys go ahead and get started. And bathrooms down this hallway, snacks, water, help yourself. And go ahead.
Thank you. All right, thanks for coming, guys. So before we get started, I kind of am curious, I know not everyone's here yet, but for those of you who are, I'm curious who is early in starting the business and how many years are you guys into your businesses, just so I have a general idea.
I haven't even started yet.
Oh, okay, good.
So I currently
Very
work
beginning.
in trade shows.
Okay.
Right now, and I'm looking to transition to social events, even if it's just a part-time job.
Okay.
But I mean, it's a full-time job, but you're doing it part-time.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm looking to do that, and I'm at the point where I'm looking for a business plan, business name. So I'm very early in the process.
Okay. Cool.
I'm in a bit of a weird situation with that question. I know it sounds straightforward. I started my business in 2017.
Okay.
But I was living in London during that time. So I would say I'm kind of in my first year because my first wedding was last October. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
Sure.
So I worked for a couple of different venues as the wedding coordinator for about 4 or 5 years. And last year I left and started my own planning company. So I've done like 10 or 12 so far. I guess it's been a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I recognize you. I wonder if I've seen you at like different events or if I've seen you at
Probably.
a venue or
I've been
something.
doing
I
this
don't
for
know.
a really long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I totally missed the question. So
Oh no, I was just wondering like where people are at the stage of starting their company, like
okay.
first year, second year, just so I have a general
I would say
idea.
this is my 5th year-ish,
Okay.
but I've been doing it for the free
Okay.
for like 4 years now, and I formalized my business last year because I realized like I needed to monetize this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm in events, so I'm not just weddings. So I've done a couple of life events, social event, and about 7 weddings.
Okay.
In that span of time. So
Okay.
I also do corporate events.
Perfect.
So I'm new in the business.
Okay.
I've done events before, but as you said, done them for free.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of getting started.
Okay.
Actually, in getting my certification for wedding planning,
Mhm.
but I also do events as well.
Okay. Perfect. So most people seem to be in planning. Are you in planning too?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm curious to see if anyone else who joins is going to be in planning as well or different industries. We'll see. So I do want to mention that this workshop is a little bit more not on the specifics of the very beginning of how I started the company, but that workshop I did last year, and I do have that saved on my Facebook. So it was a full hour and it was all recorded. So that is on Facebook if you want to go back and watch it. And then this one will kind of go into a little bit more detail of building off of that, just to give you guys a heads up. So still helpful, but I'm not going to focus so much on the beginning portion like I did last year. So yeah, I wanted to start off with this quote by Maya Angelou because I thought it was perfect for a good starting point. When you teach, learn, and when you get, give. So that is what I'm going to do today and share my journey of what I've learned along the way, because I have learned a lot. So I want to share it with you guys. Before we get started, I want to give a little bit of background of myself, just so you have a general idea of who I am, where I've come from, and everything, and how I've gotten to where I am today. So I'll try not to make this portion too long. Hello. Thanks for joining. So I grew up in a small town, and I was surrounded by people that worked in the corporate sector, the service industry, went to the Army, so I wasn't really surrounded by anyone that started their own company. I didn't really know that was an option. So when I was going to school and everything, I just thought, I would do one of those jobs. It was only natural. So I had planned that I wanted to become an attorney, and that was just what I wanted to do. I had no backup plan. I went to college. I graduated with that in mind, and just continued to go through that process. So I went to school and then took the LSAT. I was becoming a paralegal, working in law firms, doing all of that, and meeting a lot of people along the way, kind of getting their advice on things, seeing if I should continue to move forward, and then looking into law schools. And at that time I got engaged, and just slowly started planning my wedding, and it just seemed very easy. It kind of just came as second nature to me. And I had a lot of other friends at that same time that were planning their weddings as well, and I was just kind of giving them random advice. And they were like, that's just very weird that you just know these answers. And I guess I didn't know if I actually knew them, but it just seemed like common sense to me. So they were like, maybe you should look at that for a career. And I didn't know, I didn't know that it was even an option for a career. So I did. I looked into it. I ended up getting married and everything. And then I talked to my partner about it. And he was, all for any idea basically that I had. And so I took a weekend course to kind of certify me. Looking back at it, not really, but that was what I knew at the time. And I kind of just Googled it, found it. And I took that weekend class and I was officially certified for planning. And then I quit my paralegal job and was like, I'm gonna start a company. Looking back on that, not the smartest idea because I knew literally nothing. So then after that happened, I was like, great, so where do I start? And I had no one to tell me anything. I mean, I didn't have anyone that was in the business. I didn't know anyone in the wedding industry. I didn't have any friends or any family members that had started their own company. I didn't have anyone to go to, so I was just Googling random things. And shortly after, I noticed that I had to have an income to be able to start a business. So I got a part-time nannying job to kind of help me through that process. And then just kind of started building it up from there with a lot of learning along the way. So that was kind of the whole beginning process of me getting into the industry. But yeah, I go into a lot more detail with that in the other talk that I did last year. So you can go back and check that out on Facebook. So let's get into the good stuff. So I'm going to be talking about a few different topics. I'm going to be talking about community, connection, doing the work, advertising, and then growth and expansion is what we'll wrap up with. And again, I want this to be a conversation. I want everyone to kind of be involved in, so I'm not just preaching to you guys, because, there's always learning to go around. I can learn from you guys will learn from me, and all of that. So starting off with community, building a community for growing a business is so important. I cannot stress that enough. I have built my company with basically starting with building a community and continuing those conversations with all those people that I've met, and keeping those relationships up. So that has completely started my entire company, and I continue to do that, and it continues to grow. So I would say that is the focal point, which I've learned, which has helped kind of just build my entire company. So I definitely want to go into a little bit more detail on that. We can't do it alone. I need you guys need me. We need these experiences to be able to share. We need to be able to make mistakes so we know what we need to do from there on, and so on and so forth. So before we get into the details on community, and how to build your community and all of that, I want to share a little story, just to kind of set the ground for how I started in the industry. And at the beginning, like I mentioned, I had no idea where to go or where to start, and I had no one to even ask. So I was just thinking, and I was like, oh, I frequent coffee shops, and when you go in, you see little tables, or you see bulletin boards and stuff, and you see little pamphlets or business cards or notes or things that are happening in the community. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I could just drop some business cards there, and maybe someone will pick it up. It was I went into it being maybe that'll work, and in the back of my mind, I'm probably not. Because I'm thinking, me in that situation, I don't go in there and be I'm going to take this and follow up with them. I may look at it, but I don't really take it seriously. So I was just assuming everyone else did the same thing. But I did. I was I'm not going to know unless I try. So that's what I did. I went into different coffee shops, and I would ask them if I could drop my business cards or put them up on the bulletin board. And I wouldn't say you necessarily have to ask, but again, I was being budget conscious because I didn't have any money and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I didn't want someone to just throw away business cards that I had paid for and put out. And yeah, I mean, it worked out great. And I would put business cards in for coffee shops that I would frequent, and I would go back occasionally and see if they had been taken, if they had been like shuffled around, that people were like looking at them. And little did you know, I had vendors contact me, and I was like, oh. And they were like, oh, I found your business card in a coffee shop. Would you like to grab coffee sometime and talk? And I was like, yes, I would love to do that. And that kind of started the whole process with me meeting people in the industry and kind of getting their take on how they started, what the process they went through, how does pricing work, just started asking them all these questions. And I was also a benefit to them because then I was at a different price point than if they had a budget-friendly client that was looking for planning for their wedding or any other type of event, they could refer me. So it was also mutual for us to be able to connect and everything. So that was great. And that's how the whole thing started. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, you know, them referring me to clients or talking about me to other vendors, and then those vendors knowing that I existed. And then possibly referring me to their clients or just generally meeting them. And that's kind of how the whole process just started growing. So as little as that seems, that small thing just started the whole part of the company, and at least gave me a spot of where to begin and like what avenue to go down, because again, I had no idea where to even start. So I just wanted to share that because, you know, even something as small as that can actually start your company. So yeah, let's get into the conversation a little bit more and some good ways to build up your community. So do you guys have any thoughts on different ways that you could build your community?
I mean, I know you have on here the style shoots.
Yeah.
They're huge because
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
beneficial for all parties involved.
Right.
Depending on, again, we're like in the world of Instagram now, so depending on the amount of followers and what the product is put out, as a you know, you partnering up with the different like photographers, videographers, and
Right.
so on and so forth. It benefits everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Style shoots are phenomenal. At the beginning, that if you're just starting out, I know style shoots can be a little bit pricey. You can do them on a budget, but it's beneficial because, like you were saying, you get the photos, so you have content to kind of build your portfolio, and then you can continue that conversation with those vendors and keep that connection because you're continuously tagging them, you're continuously having conversations with them, so that is really helpful. But also, it opens up the whole doorway for communicating with those vendors at an actual event. So you get to understand, you know, how they work as a company or an individual person, or, you know, what time they show up, what they look like, how they hold themselves, if they're organized. And then that will help you to figure out, generally just learn from it, I feel like, for your own benefit, and like, oh, I don't want to do that, or oh, I would want to make sure I do this because I see how people are reacting to it. But also then if you want to refer them to someone, you know that they would be reliable, you know that you can trust them, you've worked with them before, you know that they can hold a conversation, that they can give good advice. So all of that is knowledge to be able to take that moving forward. So yeah, you definitely can learn from that. I think that's super beneficial to building a community. Anything else?
I would say joining an organization.
Yeah.
Like even if it's not a right organization, but other organizations, business organizations would be a good way.
For
to
sure.
connect.
Yeah, so I think that goes along with attending networking events, which I have noted. But yes, absolutely, going to networking events that are in your industry and outside of your industry. Because going to events in your industry, you know, you're with like-minded people, they're kind of on the same page with you, you guys can share different experiences and learn from one another and apply it within your industry, which is very helpful, obviously. But then going outside of your network and going to other types of events, so maybe like an art event or something else that's not specific to weddings, you're going to be meeting a lot of people that aren't directly connected with you, but they know so many other people. I mean, they may have like, you know, a sister, or maybe they get engaged. And if you keep that communication going and everything, it may come back to you. So having those connections within your community, I think, is also very beneficial as well. And I know you wanted to add something too.
Yeah, so a suggestion that I got yesterday, because I'm transitioning from conference and corporate planning into wedding planning, is to re-engage some of the venues that I use quite a bit, to share with them. So I'm thinking of a hotel, it just hit me last night in Baltimore where the past 6 years I've done 30 events there, and it didn't even occur to me to ask them or to share with them, oh, by the way, as you have bridal or wedding clients, please think of me since we've done this other work. So I think going back to some of your venue partners is helpful. And then I think the second suggestion that came up that I found very useful is to engage your base. So my base is baby boomers. They are not on Instagram, they're not on Facebook, they barely use email.
Wow.
But they're, you know, like one of my top clients, she's 77, she's a dynamo, but she has grandkids.
Yeah,
and she has
absolutely.
kids. So thinking about how to talk with them about this new service that I hope to be able to offer. So I think working your base and working your venue base in a different way is something I'm strongly considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think definitely pointing that out to your vendors and your venue, like you were saying, could be very beneficial to you because they have already worked with you. They know how you work, they know who you are, and if you give them another option that you can provide a different service, they're going to feel more comfortable with going with you than someone that they just met because you've already been in the space, you know the space, you know how they work, so they're automatically going to think of you if you tell them that you offer another service. So I would definitely play to that for sure.
And can you go back when you said the style shoot? So I've heard that a couple of times, and I think I struggle with our style shoots authentic. So in my mind, like the work that's on the website is work that I can say I was there, we did it, they know me, I know them. But style shoots are staged as opposed to, if I understand it correctly, as opposed to live weddings. Does a client think that's inauthentic or it's a good thing? I think I'm struggling with, is that the best way, or it's better to wait for a live wedding and show the authentic work? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are different types of style shoots. So maybe if you do weddings, but then you also want to do like birthday parties or smaller events just to kind of break up your year, which we offer. So, but maybe you don't have photos of that. So what I would say is you do a style shoot where you're setting up like tablescapes and decorations, but maybe not necessarily people involved in it. So you have physical photos to show that you do the work. You know what I mean? And then that's portraying to your clients a visual of what you could do. And they're not necessarily going to think, oh, that's a fake shoot. And you're not going to necessarily say, oh, I did a style shoot and it was fake. You know what I mean? You're just going to say, like, I did this and we offer weddings and this is what I can do and this is the services I can provide. And people are just going to automatically associate that with, you can do this service. So it's basically just showing a visual of what you can do. And there are other style shoots that you can do, like mock weddings, where you can have like models and stuff like that, where you actually can go a little bit more in depth to make it look more real. So when you post it on social media, you have physical humans in the photos, and to a client, they're gonna think those people probably got married. But to you, they didn't. But again, it's just another visual showing that you can do a different styled wedding if someone's looking for that, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think anybody goes around, or any of the wedding planners that actually do style shoots, I don't think they go around saying, by the way, what I'm posting right now is a style shoot, so.
Right, it's fake,
it's
by the way,
fake,
yeah.
So don't, believe in the work, or don't believe in whatever is being shown.
Right.
And just say, oh, so-and-so was gorgeous, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth, so.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what are the benefits to building a community, which we kind of touched on as we had that conversation, but just to kind of reiterate. Anyone have any input on that?
I guess the benefit would be, like you said, getting new clients, and then also learning from each other.
Exactly.
Getting some of the experiences that others may have had, and taking that and maybe doing something different or doing something the same thing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. So gaining the exposure and then that knowledge that you're learning and also that you're getting as well. So giving and getting. But definitely those are both benefits to take with you from building a community. So now I'm going to go into connection, which also is kind of just plays off of community, which we also, just barely touched on, but I want to go into a little bit more detail, because maintaining those connections of the community that you're building is, again, so important, that even if you're not working with those people, you need to continue that conversation, because you want to keep yourself fresh in these people's minds, so that down the road, if they needed a planner or whatever type of service you offer, they're going to come back to you, or at least consider you. You know what I mean? So who do we want to maintain those connections with? Yeah, definitely your clients, for sure.
Any vendors that you've worked with.
Right. Yeah. Any vendors that you've worked with. And then also I put in here close acquaintances and friends that you just generally meet along the way. And I think this is an important one that a lot of people don't think about. So people that you just communicate throughout your daily routine. So maybe like your barista, like maybe you go to the same coffee shop once a week or every day, or your workout instructor or anything like that. Keeping those communications with those people and continuing to build them and build those relationships, because although they may not be a direct connection with someone in your industry and working in your industry, they're going to know other people, and eventually they may get married. So for an exact example of me, I had workout class that I was always going to, and I'm like a very in tune person, but also kind of like zoned out when I'm in workout. And my workout instructor had come in, and she talks like as she's going through everything. And she mentioned her fiance in passing, like in a conversation. And I was like, fiance? I don't remember her mentioning fiance. But I was like in workout mode, so I was like, maybe I just didn't hear or whatever. And not to be like too forward, but I was like, oh, are you getting married? And she was like, yeah. She's like, I don't know anything about this. And I was like, oh, cool. And I was like, well, I'm happy to like educate you and, just get your feel on things and see if I can like provide you with some helpful information. And she was like, oh, do you work in the wedding industry? And I was like, yeah, I'm a planner. And she was like, oh, well, that's helpful. And so I had gone into the meeting just being like, oh, I'll just educate her and like help her on a few things, answer some questions. And she was going into the meeting as, I'm gonna hire this person, but I didn't know that. And because she like knew me, we had talked in class and everything. And she was like, no, I think that you know what you're talking about. And she's like, so can I hire you? And I was like, yeah, sure. But you just never know where that's gonna go. Or like if your barista ends up meeting someone in the coffee shop and they're like, oh, I'm getting married. If you happen to know anyone, like send them my way. They might be like, oh, I know someone. You know what I mean? You just don't know where that's gonna go. So definitely nurture those relationships for sure. What are some good ways to maintain these relationships? So keep them going. How can you continue the conversation?
I do a lot of this on Instagram. Like I connect to everyone in the bridal party, and if they're posting things like the bachelorette party, just kind of getting in that way, commenting on things.
No, that's
happy
a great
anniversary,
idea.
happy 6 months.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's definitely a good way to keep the conversation going with clients for sure. Anyone else?
I guess, like I understand that aspect of it, keeping in contact, but I think one of the things that I struggle with because I do everything, it's not just wedding, so it's kind of odd, not odd, but like, let's say for example you did somebody's first birthday party or 5th birthday party, 21st, 30th, whatever, it's kind of like weird to just like keep reminding, like, I don't know, I just find it like disingenuous almost, to be like, oh, 6 months ago was so-and-so's first birthday, like, happy 1.5 year, like, yeah. I don't know. It's just weird, when, I understand it for wedding because it makes sense,
yeah.
But when you like connect with some, or family members or acquaintances, like, for let's say a 1-year-old's birthday party or 16th birthday party, it's kind of disingenuous to still be like, hey, I don't know, maybe I feel that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have had that experience, for those of you who've done other things other than weddings.
Yeah.
So
I feel like also keep in mind that it doesn't have to be directly connected to the wedding or the event or something that you helped them with. To try and keep that conversation going. So what I try and think back to is like, if it is a wedding specifically, I'll think back to, oh, so-and-so mentioned this, or that they're in this type of industry, or that like they generally work with these types of people. Just because, when you're planning, people will be like, oh, I do so and so with like organization, so I understand that because my job has something to do with that. So I kind of keep those things in mind, and if I come across someone that may be directly connected with something that they do, to kind of put me back in their memory, I'll be like, oh, by the way, I met so and so, and this, I don't know if like maybe you know them, or it seemed like it might be connected with your company. Just wanted to say, hey, how you guys doing? Or also like on Instagram, you were saying you connect with your clients and everything. I'll connect with people and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot I saw your thing that you posted. That's awesome that you went on vacation. I've been wanting to go there. How was it? Just to like restart that conversation, but it has nothing to do with like the wedding specifically. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well. Just because then it presents yourself as like a normal human to them, not as someone that they hired. And then that maybe makes them want to continue the conversation with you and be more on like a friend level. Because I've kind of started to turn that around with some of my old clients, and then just communicating with them like on normal things, and then we slowly just start to become friends. Other good ways to maintain the relationships are styled shoots, like we were saying, keeping those conversations going, continuously tagging, having those conversations online, will just put those people back in the front of their mind. And then you could do like a small get together, a potluck, a cocktail party, anything to kind of just bring people outside of like the work zone and just have a natural conversation. I think also just furthers that relationship and just kind of keeps it going. And the same with like a coffee date, or maybe a lunch date if you're feeling extra comfortable with that person, or maybe drinks at the end of the day. And you don't have to talk about like work stuff specifically. It can just be like, how's life? How's your day job? You know what I mean? And then that just allows you to get to know them on a personal level, but then also on a business level. And then it just kind of like, you can cross promote and help each other. And then once you have that like trusting relationship on a personal level, then the business kind of just follows. So I think that's helpful too.
So what do you mean by a co-work day?
Oh, co-work day, yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Totally would have forgot to mention that. So co-work day, I have a lot of these with people that have left their day job and they're trying to just get into it and hustle and everything, but a lot of us don't have offices to go to. I mean, it's expensive. Sometimes it just doesn't work for different companies in the industry. For my company, for example, I don't necessarily need a workspace because we're kind of all over the place. We're traveling. We can work from home or different coffee shops, but maybe we don't want to do that and we want to be around like-minded people so we can have conversations, or maybe we're emailing different clients and we're like, oh, I don't know if this sounds right, and we can just be like, hey, have you had this experience before? So it's a really good opportunity to be able to just share the space with other people in your industry and just go to a coffee shop, go to a networking facility or like a breather space like this, and just invite a bunch of people in the industry. For a couple hours, half a day, continue on to lunch, and just be able to be in the same space and work together. You don't have to necessarily communicate the whole time, but you have the opportunity to. And I think it also just switches up your mind a little bit and allows you to be in a different headspace where you're not just so zoned in at home to like kick out all these things as like you're like a robot. You know what I mean? It just kind of lightens the mood, I feel like, a little bit. So what are the benefits to maintaining these connections?
Well, if you're keeping a positive interaction with a vendor you've worked with before, or even somebody brand new, they're going to think about using you the next time. Maybe something comes up, like you had said, if you have a budget-friendly client, they'll keep you in mind for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely true. And also with communicating with past clients and keeping those connections, if someone forgot to give you a review, which this has happened to me, they'll come back months later, even a year later, and be like, oh, I just reviewed you, I totally forgot. So, just kind of keeping that in mind, that like you did a good job and like remember me. And even if they don't give you a review, or maybe they already gave you one, like you were saying, they may refer another client to you, maybe their sister, maybe their cousin, maybe their neighbor. So yeah, that's super helpful. And the same with vendors. All right, on to the work. So this is another big one, which I've noticed has definitely helped me. What do I mean by the work? Like putting in the work? Anyone have any thoughts?
actually doing the job.
Yeah.
Instead of just marketing and writing contracts
Right.
and stuff, like planning weddings. I always feel like I spend 90% of my time getting the clients, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I have to actually plan their wedding.
I know, right? You're like, gosh, I've struggled so hard to get all this.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And to go into a little bit more detail on that is also being flexible with your pricing, definitely more so at the beginning. And I know that, we want to know our worth, we want to make all the money, we want to stand our ground and be like, I'm worth this. But at the beginning, you do need to be a little bit more flexible because you want to get those clients. You want that experience. You want to build your portfolio. So if you lose a couple $100 here and there, who cares? You're going to end up making it up because you're going to get more clients in the end game.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so much good questions.
no, absolutely.
Different than last night.
No, it's not even. It's different from last night. Again, last night was like standard and all of that, but at the same time, that's something I struggle with personally.
Mm-hmm.
So just starting out, like I said, I'm like, I did put in the work. Like I've done this for free for 4 years now, and now I want my share, and I'm standing my ground. And I remember just having a conversation with a potential client, and she was just like, and I told her my price. She was like, oh, you're out of our price range. Our price range is XYZ. And when I calculated, it was like a $600 difference, give or take. And like when she said that, I was with planning is not my full-time job. I'm a tech consultant by day. So of course I'm like always talking to people, and I was telling my coworker like, oh my God, am I gonna let this go for $600? Should I stand my ground and like hopefully I'll do a bomb job and she'll, bring me more clients? And he was like, are you desperate? Like, are you desperate?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And he's like, then stand your ground. And that's something I struggle with because I'm like, I want the work, like I want more work, but at the same time, like at what cost?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like it's
No,
like,
absolutely.
like I know I'm gonna do a great job for you. I know I'm gonna put my all in it, but like, I just need you to work with me just a little bit more. Even if she honestly, if she came up like, let's say 200 more, I would have been like, okay, let me close my eyes. I'm gonna touch it. I'm gonna do it. Be okay with it. But at the same time, she was just like, no, like my pricing is this, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
And
I
that
think
just,
it is
crushed
very.
me. So with you saying that, I'm like,
Yeah.
how do you do it? Like,
I think it is very situational, like you were saying. How your friend was like, "Oh, are you desperate? Do you really need it?"
right,
So I think that's where you kind of weigh the line a little bit,
right,
and make that decision. And it's going to be different for everyone at different portions throughout their career.
right.
But I think knowing that will help kind of give you a little bit more footing to understand when you should make the sacrifice and when you maybe don't need to.
Right.
If you're very booked and you have a busy season coming up and someone's like, oh, it's $500 less that we're looking to spend, then you're probably just like, sorry, that's my price.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if someone is looking, like I've had this situation where it was like a year or so ago, and I've been in the business for over 6 years now, and I'm at a spot where like I don't necessarily need to go down in price just to get clients. But this client had like a very awesome wedding, and it was very non-traditional, like very in line with what we do.
Right.
And I knew it was going to be a good one for me to take on. But you're right, it was like $400 less than our packages, and I ended up taking it because I was like, I want that wedding. I liked them as a couple. I very much vibed with them, and I really wanted that to be part of my portfolio. So that's another thing I think you need to consider. But I looked at my other weddings, and everyone had been paying, above or had built their packages up higher. So I knew I could take that.
Right.
So I think you just have to you have to weigh it out.
So, in that same, oh my gosh, you're reading my mind. In that same breath, so when I did talk to her, she's like a super cool photographer and just like really spunky, very non-traditional wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm like, should I go back? Now that you said it, I'm like, should I go back and be like, hi?
Yeah.
I'm willing to meet your price, or does it look shady or desperate?
No, I don't think it looks shady or desperate. I mean, I think it's just more so what do you want? Does it feel right to you? Does it feel like this is going to be a good client to work with? Does it seem like it would benefit you by it being part of your portfolio?
Okay.
Can you take on the work? Are you going to be working harder for less money?
Yeah.
So I think you just have to weigh all those options and be like, should I do it or should I just pass on this one?
Okay.
Yeah. And then taking on clients that you don't want, which kind of plays off a little bit with that, but I think that's very important, and it's even more important to make sure that you're taking on clients that you don't want, but ones that you still feel comfortable that you can work with and do a good job. You don't want to take on clients that you don't want, that you know are not going to be a good match with you. Like if you just have total different personalities and you know it's going to clash, you don't want to take on that client. But there may be a client that you're like, this isn't necessarily my type of client, I'm thinking, but maybe you need to build your portfolio, maybe you need that experience, and you know that they're flexible enough that like you can get along to get the job done. Those are the types of clients at the beginning that I think you need to consider at least, for sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry I came in a little bit late.
No, totally, fine.
My name is Deborah.
Hi.
Hi. So along those lines, I just wanted to tell a little story about sometimes when someone is coming to you late in the game, and it's hard to make that assessment because you don't have the time factor on your side in terms of assessing whether it's going to be a good match. And I had a situation like that a couple of years ago where I started in with this client and they were terrific, and ended up having to fire them. The only time we ever had to do that because the groom, and this was an older couple, became very abusive. And I had my top vendor team in place and offered to get them a day out coordinator. It started off terrific. And then like this, it went downhill very, very quickly. And I realized that it was only going to get worse. And it was a situation where it was really hard to do because ethically I didn't want to do that. But when you're in a situation where you don't have the time working in your favor, and they were overseas, so it wasn't even like I could meet with them. And it ended up really being, this is just not a good match. And as crazy as he was, I went to my vendor team and I said, it's becoming abusive. But to them, I said, this doesn't appear to be the best match.
And I mean, sometimes that happens and you just have to work with the flow.
And I refunded, part of them, and, I actually know what happens. It paid for like half of it and all that work was done. And they had a payment due for the second half, which just said, let's just.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I think that's good to at least notice. You had noticed when it started going downhill and you were like, this is a trend that's probably going to continue or get worse, and I just need to get out now. And I think that is very important to make sure that you are kind of in tune with the whole situation and knowing that, because if you would have let it kept going, it could have gotten much worse.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be worth it. It wasn't worth it to my sanity. It wasn't worth it to my vendor team. It wasn't worth it to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, thanks for sharing. That's definitely very helpful, and I'm sure people have it. Yeah.
It was painful to be subject to what he was doing, and it was painful to have to not follow through on a commitment.
Right, because I mean, we've committed to that, and we want to do that, and we want to help them, and we want to see the outcome. But yeah, I mean, I've had experiences of that, and if you're just starting out and you haven't, be prepared. I mean, it's going to happen. To some extent, you're going to have experiences like this. And I mean, as long as you're prepared and you're okay with it, you're going to get through it and you're going to learn from it, and you'll be able to move forward and everything.
Do you subscribe to the school of thought where a lot of the planners are just like, well, define your niche and stick to it. Like, don't deviate just to get somebody in your portfolio, or because you've already defined it. If the profile of the person or the client doesn't look like this, then that's not your client. Like, do you subscribe to this?
I think it depends on the type of company you're trying to run. So for example, for us, we don't have a specific type of client that we try to get. I know a lot of planners, they want one specific style. Like maybe they really like light and airy photos. They like to work with those types of photographers all the time. They want all their stuff to be consistent. So they want those types of couples that are going to gravitate towards that. For us, our motto is that we work with couples that we basically just work for the couples to present their weddings. We don't care what they look like. We don't care what they want. We're going to make it happen. So I think it just depends on what type of company you're building and what you want that to look like. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one I want to touch on under this topic is to always go above and beyond. And this goes along with another quote that I want to go over just because it's very fitting and it is so, so true. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is so true. When I read this, it literally is out of a book from doing weddings, because we put in all this work and we're doing all the logistics and we're spending hours of time working on timing and communication with people and working up all these backup plans and everything, and the couple may not even notice that. They may go away and be like, everything's great, and you're just like, that's it? You know what I mean? But what they're going to remember is if you are in tune with them and you notice, for example, they're during their wedding photos and you can just tell they're overwhelmed. What they're gonna remember is you take them out of that situation and you say, do you feel like you've done all your photos, regardless if we've accomplished the shot list? And if they say yes, just say, you can walk away. Go have a moment. You don't have to do any photos, because then they know you're on their side and they know that you're there for them and you're not just there to check a box for their wedding. That is gonna make them feel so good that at the end of the day, regardless if something goes wrong, they're gonna remember that moment and they're gonna think you did an amazing job. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also think it's important, and I love that Maya Angelou quote, in terms of the feeling, the people extending to your vendor team.
Mm-hmm.
So, as someone who, my first job, I was a housekeeper, so I used to clean, and I would always remember how people who saw me and people who dismissed me, because I was just cleaning. And I think sometimes for banquet professionals, so I'm talking more on the conference side, or for even the housekeeping staff, or those individuals who aren't in the top jobs, or appear to have importance, sometimes they're not seen. And I have found when I go back to venues where I know birthdays, I know about their kids, I know those people, and I think it's important that we extend that feeling to those who are in service or in a planning relationship with us. Absolutely, the couple, the client too, but nothing burns me up more when we've all seen the planner who's yelling or cursing or losing his or her cookie in a way that's just not very kind.
Absolutely.
And so I love this quote, but I think it should be also a 360 perspective.
No, I totally agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow on that with another piece of that, which I think is the guest experience.
Yes.
And a lot of times when, whether it's a wedding or another important life cycle function, people get so wrapped up in whether it's going to, how it's going to look, whether it's going to be Instagrammable, and whether they're doing the latest this and the latest that. And they're so wrapped up in that they are forgetting that they are also a host. And so I also feel like our job is to project them as the ultimate host, and really to get them for us to get to know who are the guests at this particular event, whether it's a wedding or whatever it is. Who are your guests? Do you have older guests? Do you have young children? Who's going to be there? Diversity in terms of cultural or religious backgrounds, in terms of who's going to be there, so that everybody is comfortable. Because it goes back to, like you said, they're going to remember how they feel, and they're going to project that back to whoever, whether it's the couple or the family.
Or they're just going to talk about it to the couple.
Right. And everybody wants to walk away. They want to be told, God, that was the best. They want
right.
to. And so I feel like part of our job is to project that back onto them, by helping them to think these things through in advance. We're helping them to be the ultimate host.
Exactly. I always try and go out of my way for every wedding for the guest. I try and think of them as a part of the couple. And I try to make that known a little bit at the beginning of the planning processes when I'm asking the couple questions like, do you have older guests? how can we make this accommodating for everyone? Do you have children? Do you have a nanny, or do you have someone that's going to be on site? How can we help with that? Do you have people with food restrictions? Where are they sitting? What are they going to look like? And I always try and make a point to go up to that table and say, hi, I noticed that, we have a few food restrictions. I've had a communication with the catering. They should take care of you if they don't find me. So that they know that, like, we know they exist, because at the end of the day, that's what they're going to remember. Yeah. All right, so now let's get into advertising, which is a big one, as we all know. So I'll go into a little bit of digital and traditional advertising. Yeah. And let's start off with digital advertising first. So we have blogs and websites and social media are the main ones that I've mentioned here. So let's talk a little bit more about those specifically. For blogs and websites, what are good digital advertising options on those? Any thoughts?
Feature on a blog.
Yeah, definitely a feature, or even advertising your company, like paying for advertisements on the site or the blog. Most of these are paid for, so this is going to be for companies that maybe have that available funds to be able to dedicate to this. I would say there are some options that are unpaid for newer companies that are online that are trying to get people to advertise for free so that they can show that they offer it to eventually get people to pay. So that is an option as well. And then social media, there's so many free options. Definitely utilize it. I think we all probably use social media to some extent. There are many different platforms, and you'll find which one's going to work best for your company and the services that you're providing. Utilize it. I've tried the paid options, haven't really worked for planning. I feel like it works more so for physical products that people are selling. But trial and error, give it a try. If you have the funds, try it out. But definitely utilize these options.
A question is, so for blogs, do you also recommend having like a blog for your company? Your own blog, and then putting that out, or you're just talking about promoting other, existing blogs?
So we have a blog, and I have noticed that from the beginning, the more content that I'm putting out, we're putting out content that people are asking us questions about. So we know that it's something that people want to see and they want to know about and they want to be educated about. So we're trying to put content out about that. We're not just putting out things that we want people to look at photos. So quality content that hopefully will teach them something. But I think that there's companies that should have blogs and companies that shouldn't have blogs. I think it's just dependent on if it's going to work for your company. Do you have the time to dedicate to that? Would it work for you to even have a blog? Would it make sense?
I have a question. So I'm looking, community connection, the work, advertising. What percentage of your time do you spend on advertising?
What percentage do I spend on advertising? So we spend very little. Again, I work off of a lot of communication, building my community, keeping those connections with clients, with my vendors, and being very diligent about reviews. So going after my clients to really try to get those reviews. And that's where I get the bulk of my inquiries from. And then and reviews that goes off of, I get the bulk of my the bulk of my clients from like Yelp, but it's people that review me on Yelp. I don't pay for Yelp. People review me on Yelp, specifically DC people. DC people are Yelpers, and that's where we get a lot of our clients. And I think the only one that we pay for is Offbeat Bride. That's because it plays to the type of client that we want. It's very inexpensive and their SEO is very good. So we'll get a couple clients from that a year, which is 7 times over what we pay for. So I mean, it very much pays off. And other than that, we don't really pay for anything. We don't do trade shows. It doesn't really work for planning, at least for me it hasn't, because we don't have a physical product for people to hear, for people to see. And it's hard to be able to physically show someone the logistics and what we're gonna do to make happen, essentially. So there isn't a whole lot that we pay for. It's just a lot of networking, a lot of communicating, style shoots from time to time, networking events, just doing a lot of that and making sure I get those reviews.
So things like.
And blogging. We get clients from blogging.
Thank you.
Just because as we do more blogs, it builds the SEO. So it gives us more of an opportunity to be found online. And a lot of clients will say, oh, I Googled something and your blog popped up. And I'll be like, yes, it's working.
So things like the wedding wire and the not storefronts, those are not things that you invest in?
I've never invested in them. I've toyed with the idea. I've gotten a lot of different opinions from people when I first started out. I literally called vendors and was like, hi, how long have you been on here and has this worked for you? A little forward, but I wanted to know what people thought about it. And also it's such an oversaturated network, I feel like, in my opinion. And also I feel like the types of clients that come through there are not our type of client. We're not looking for super high-end types of clients. We're not looking for very needy clients. We're not looking for very perfect clients that want things to be Pinterest perfect. We're not looking for those types of couples. And what I've heard is a lot of people like that come from there. So I've never even tried to tap into that. That could be incorrect. I have no idea because I've never tried it.
It's so weird you said that, because even for me in considering advertising, of course, Denat reached out, and then Wedding Wire. And for Wedding Wire, I was like, okay, well, this is more my speed, and I like the types of diversity that I saw on there. And when I reached out to the people that were on the front page, it was almost like they were keeping things close to the chest. So I literally was very forward. Went on their Instagram. I was like, by the way, hi, my name is Jenny. I'm just starting out. I noticed that you're on the front, you have a storefront, front page or whatever. And just crickets. And those that did actually answer, it was weird. Those that did actually answer was I do well. And it was people were withholding information. It was just really awkward.
Right.
Out of 10 people that I reached out to, probably 2 people answered me and gave me that really murky answer, and the rest just ignored me. It was
and it's not directly with those companies, but I just try to be very aware of those types of people in those situations. And if I start to feel like you were saying that people are kind of reserved or feeling that it's competitive with me, I just literally go the opposite way, because I'm I don't even want that to be around me.
Right.
Because then my whole vibe and all of the work that I'm trying to put in, all the creativity is just going to immediately be cut off.
Right.
So I just don't even want to enter that, and would rather be surrounded with other people than that. So
when you're starting off and you're doing your advertising through the blogging and social media, what do you recommend for people who's just starting out? How often should you blog, or how often should you do a style shoot or post anything on social media?
So when we first started out, I did more style shoots because I wanted to build my portfolio, so I needed to do more. And I also had the time because I had less clients. And then for blogging, I did a lot more blogs per week. So when I first started out, again, I didn't have a lot of clients, so I had a ton of time to think of the content and just start putting content out there. So I think I did 4 blog posts a week or something, which, thinking back to it, is totally insane, but I also didn't have other work to take up my time. But yeah, I would do a blog post almost every day during the week, and then I slowly started backing. It would be 3 and then 2 and then 1 a week, and then it'd be 1 every other week. So it would just kind of depend. And now I'm not super consistent with it, where it's I release a blog every Wednesday. I would love to get there, but I'm controlling so many different people and running so many different events that that is not the priority. Yes, we're getting clients from our blogs, but there's already, it's already built up. I already have a lot of content out there, and we're communicating with people on social media, so I'm able to quickly answer some questions. So it's not as regiment as it was before. And for style shoots now, it's 1 a year. Yeah, go ahead.
Me again, sorry. So, for an existing business, so I've had my business for 12 years, just in a different body of work. As you were talking, what was getting triggered for me is I need a dedicated person to focus exclusively on weddings if this is going to work. Would you say that's true? So right now, it's the conferences, the meetings, symposiums, and galas. And because I have the interest, I am in turn here trying to do the wedding social work. But given what you just said about the social media, the style shoots, the writing, etc., if it's really going to work, someone needs dedicated time for it to work. Is that what you would say?
No, absolutely. And I go into that a little bit with the growth and expansion at the end, which I don't know if we're going to make it to.
Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. But yes, absolutely. If you are trying to go in another direction and you want to start building that up, you probably do need to get someone on board to train and just start working with and seeing how it's going to work together with another person to slowly start opening that door, essentially. Okay, so I'll quickly go through the pros and cons of digital advertising, which are probably fairly obvious. But the pros are going to be it's going to boost your SEO. For those of you who don't know what that is, search engine optimization. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail about that because I'm not an SEO pro. But what I do know is that basically the more content that you're putting out there that has your company name on it, the higher chances that someone can search you online and find you. So if you're on multiple social media channels, if you do blogs, if you advertise on different channels, all of that is going to just bump your company up and give you more of a possibility to be found. And then having various levels of advertising options. So different price points of doing free to something that's a little bit more expensive. Having that as an option is very good for you because depending on where you are in your company, there's probably going to be something available to you to be able to utilize for online advertising. And then a con could be websites could be oversaturated. So if you're spending the money or even doing something for free, it just may not be worth your time because there could be too many advertisements on that website or on that blog that someone just may not even find you. Or maybe someone goes on there to read a blog and there's so many pop-ups and things that they're just like, I don't want to read this blog anymore. You know what I mean? So just kind of weighing those pros and cons and seeing if that's a good option for you. And obviously it could be too expensive. So if it's too expensive, may not be the right route for you, and then try the free options like I did to begin with and see where that takes you and then go up from there. So on to traditional advertising options. We have published features and then self-advertising. So published features would be like features in magazines. Again, this is going to be most likely paid unless you do a great event and a magazine seeks you out and says, we want to publish this, we want this in our magazine. That would probably be the only option. It would be for free, and magazine features can be quite expensive. Just because the whole process of obviously publishing a magazine is more expensive. So that's something to pay attention to see if that's the right fit for you. For me and my company personally, I have done magazine features before where I've paid for them, and I have never gotten any sort of response from vendors or clients. No one's ever said they saw me in them. No one's ever said that they found me in them or anything. So for me, it never worked, but maybe it would for other people. I don't know. I think it just depends on the content that you're putting out there, the product, whatever it is, and how you portray that, and maybe something would come back. But again, just trial and error, I think. And self-advertising. So what I mean by self-advertising is kind of going back to that communication where you are going to different networking events and just having those conversations where you're kind of dropping your company name, where it's not like a direct thing, or maybe you're just having like a coffee meeting with someone and you're just like, oh yeah, I just do, I do planning, just like casually kind of sliding it in. So yeah, that is very helpful. And again, it's free. So it's like me when I went and I put my business cards in coffee shops. It's that same thing. Like I would go and work in coffee shops, and if I overheard people talking, I'd be like, oh my God, that's so funny. And then they'd be like, oh, what do you do? And I'd be like, oh, I'm an event planner. And they're like, oh, I have a friend who's getting married, or I have a friend that could be beneficial. Do you have a business card? You know what I mean? So just kind of being aware of your surroundings and like tune in to see if you can have a conversation with someone. So the pros to traditional advertising are going to be, for a magazine specifically, is you physically have something to show off your work. So if you're trying to get a client, bringing that to your client meeting, maybe that's for them. Maybe them seeing you in that magazine will make them think that you're more legit. I don't personally think that that's necessary, but to them it may. So that could be a pro to paying for a magazine feature. And then obviously just generally to boost your company, which I think is a pretty obvious one. But any type of additional advertising you can get out there for your company is most likely going to boost your company in some way, if it's found on its own or if you're trying to promote it and you're